Thanks to the NAR lawsuit and settlement, there's a lot of conversation around how realtors get paid. So let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Danny Brown. I'm the CEO of Myriad Real Estate Group, and we represent both buyers and sellers. Traditionally, the way that it works pre-settlement, or proposed settlement, I should say, is that a listing agent will charge a seller usually a dollar amount or a percentage, and that ranges anywhere from 5 to 7% depending on your location. And then they offer a percentage or dollar amount to the agent that brings a buyer to the table. So the big myth that exists right now is that the seller pays the buyer's agent. That is not correct. The seller pays the listing agent then pays the buyer's agent. And that's even not true. Buyer's agent actually gets paid by their broker. So the listing agent offers a co-broke to the buyer's agent's broker. So the broker is the entity that an agent or an agent's team works at, or what's called hangs their license. And so every brokerage is set up differently and charges a variety of fees, whether that's per transaction, whether that's a monthly fee, however that is negotiated and set up. So whatever the listing agent is offering to the buyer's agent doesn't go straight to the buyer. Like, I don't get paid directly from a listing agent. It's got to go to my broker, and then my broker takes their piece and then pays me. So whenever you're working with a buyer's agent, don't think that they are getting 100% of whatever is being offered, because that's simply not the case. So let's talk about the new way, or what's being proposed come this July. The new way that's going to exist is that the listing agent will no longer pay the buyer's agent and the buyer's brokerage. It's going to come directly from the seller or directly from the buyer, or a combination of both depending on what's negotiated. Currently, the MLS advertises or states clearly how much a buyer's agent is getting paid or compensated for representing a buyer in that purchase. So in this new world, the buyer's agent is not necessarily going to know what the seller is offering, or the listing agent is offering as a payment for representing that buyer. And so to correct that, what will take place is now buyer's agents will have to enter into a contract with their buyer. Now, I've been operating this way for years, and it only makes sense to me that a listing agent and seller have a contract together, that a buyer and their buyer's representative would have a contract together as well. And in that contract, it will state very clearly what that buyer's agent is charging to the buyer for their services. For example, the way that we operate is we charge our buyer clients 3% for our services. They're very aware of that. We go out and we show them homes, and currently we can see in the MLS that if a seller, or a listing agent rather, is not offering us the full 3% as compensation, then the buyer will have to, as part of their closing costs, make up that difference. So if a listing agent is offering us 2.5%, the buyer will then be responsible for that additional 0.5% for acquiring our services to represent them as the buyer's agent. And I would argue about 100% of the time we actually negotiate that as part of the overall deal to get the listing agent or the seller through closing cost assistance or concessions to help cover those additional costs that are being passed on to the buyer. This is something that I think is going to continue into this new world. So buyer's agents will still be getting compensated for their services, but making it part of the overall negotiations as part of the total offer. Now, because it's being eliminated as a commission in the MLS, what will take its place is sellers can now advertise what concessions, if any, they are willing to offer to a buyer to help them cover the cost of representation, the cost of a lender, their title and escrow fees, all of those fees that a buyer gets charged for purchasing a property. The seller will still be able to advertise, but instead of the word commission, it will be labeled concession. Now, if you're selling a home, you may be immediately thinking like, oh, now I don't have to pay, 6% or whatever that percentage is to the listing agent to help cover the buyer's costs. I think that is a mistake in your thinking, and that you should absolutely still be willing to help the buyer cover those costs as part of the overall deal, because it's actually in your best interest to have an agent representing the buyer in the transaction. Currently, when a buyer would like to see a home, their representative, who is a licensed professional that has insurance, has to follow a code of ethics, is responsible for all intents and purposes babysitting their buyer when they're in your home with no one there. So if there isn't a buyer on the other side, you're either expecting your listing agent to show up for every showing, which I don't believe is realistic, just based on the location of homes, or you're allowing people without a representative there to watch them walk through your home. I, for one, would not want to have people walk through my property that aren't accompanied by a professional who, again, has that insurance, has to abide by a code of ethics, making sure that those people aren't rooting through my drawers or stealing my shit. Like, there is absolutely a benefit to having a professional be there and be responsible for those people walking through your home. Now, if you're on the buy side and you're thinking of going at it alone, there's going to be a lot of value, and I think that that's the ultimate point of this conversation, is what is the value of a buyer's agent? And now the Department of Justice would argue that there's zero value to a buyer's agent, and I think that some of you would probably argue that as well, but I think that you're just working with the wrong individuals. So a good buyer's agent, one, and this sounds small, but is going to coordinate all of the showings for you. Now, if you're just wanting to see one home, that's really easy typically to schedule to view. But if you're looking to see 3, 4, 5, 10 houses at a time, and you're doing this by yourself, I highly doubt that you are going to be able to coordinate with all of those listing agents to meet them at the property at times that are convenient for you. They are going to meet you at the home when it's convenient for them. Let's be serious. Odds are you are spending a lot of time online looking at homes. You're on Zillow, you're on Redfin, you're on realtor.com, and you are scouring the web looking for the perfect home. And you should be. Nobody knows what you want in a home better than you. Nobody knows your taste better than you. Nobody knows what you ultimately want better than you do. So you should be taking that active role. When you find that perfect and ideal home, they are going to negotiate a good deal for you. They are going to make sure that they check with the listing agent and pick their brain and know what questions to ask so that they can give you additional information and context of what's truly important to the seller. Sometimes it's not all about price. Sometimes it's having a longer closing, a shorter closing. And so how do you parse out and find out that information from a listing agent to be able to incorporate that into your offer? Then they can run a market analysis. I think that negotiating is really gut instinct, and where can you be super aggressive and when can't you be, and what can you get away with and what can't you get away with. And so there is an art to that negotiation and getting you concessions, getting you a discounted price on the home. If you pay a higher price, can you get more in concessions, which may have a much larger impact on your overall monthly payment? So it's having those conversations and knowing how to have those conversations to ultimately get you the best deal. And then finally, once you're under contract, that's when I say the real work definitely starts, because that is navigating all of the ins and outs with the title company. That is navigating and communicating with your lender. And just like all industries, there's good lenders and there's bad lenders. So a lot of times, if you have a good buyer's agent, they are sometimes doing the job of your lender. It is coordinating and scheduling inspections and knowing what inspections to order that are important to that specific area and that specific home. It's not always just a general inspection. Sometimes you need to be way more thorough and make sure that you're doing proper due diligence on that home. Last year, we looked at our numbers, and on average, we saved our clients about $20,000 per deal on the buyer side. And then we looked at the time we spent on each individual buyer, from our initial consultation to when we gave them keys, and it was roughly 30 hours. So some take longer, some take shorter, right? It's an average, but it was on average about 30 hours. Now, I'm not saying that what I do is insanely difficult, but what I do saves people money and ultimately saves them time, right? What does your time, what is it worth to you? And do you want to spend almost a full work week navigating and trying to purchase the property? And I would argue that based on our experience, we're more efficient than somebody that doesn't do this every day. So it may take you 50 to 60 hours to navigate what takes us 30. I could do my own taxes. I could use TurboTax. I could probably read through all the stuff and fill out everything to file my taxes, but it is a labor-intensive job, and it is totally worth it to me to pay someone else to file my taxes, to know what things to deduct and to know what things to take advantage of, within my business to help save me money. I think when you hire the right CPA or accountant, they're saving you money and they're saving you time. So real estate is very similar. I think in the short term, this NAR stuff is making the real estate transaction a lot messier, a lot more chaotic. I do think that there will be good things that come out of this in the long run. I'm a big supporter of using a buyer-broker agreement and having contracts between a buyer and their agent. I think a good thing to come out of this is now everyone is, I think, acutely aware that what you charge on the listing side, what you charge on the buyer side is absolutely negotiable. And I think that we will see, a bifurcation as it pertains to the quality of representation. That's ultimately what I think the Department of Justice should have put a spotlight on is why are there so many agents that do 0 transactions? Why is it so easy to get a real estate license, right? That's the problem within the industry. It's not how much we get paid, it's just the sheer number of average people that get paid a lot for doing so little. Real estate is a super complicated transaction. I always say it's not a matter of if something goes wrong, it's a matter of when and how bad will it be. And then I have the experience and have witnessed pretty much every scenario that comes up, so I know how to navigate you through that process. And so your representation on the seller side, on the buyer side, we absolutely deserve to get paid. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to give a like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, I would love to read them.